The heat inside the old two-story house pressed against the lieutenant's face shield like a second skin. Smoke hung thick and oily, stinging his eyes even through the mask, while the radio on his shoulder crackled with terse updates from his crew, working the line behind him. The thermal imager had shown the worst of the fire in the kitchen and rear bedrooms. Manageable, contained for now. His boots found solid purchase on the living room floor as he swept his light across the space one last time. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing in the data said stop. Then something shifted. Not a sound he could name, not a visible crack or sudden flare, but a wrongness in the way the floor answered his weight. A fraction of a second's extra give, a subtle yielding that shouldn't have been there. His chest tightened. Years of walking into burning buildings had taught his body to read what his eyes could not yet see. "Everybody out," he said into the radio, voice steady but urgent. "Now, clear the floor." They moved without debate, training and trust overriding confusion. They were still crossing the threshold when the floor behind them erupted with a deep, splintering roar. Flames punched upward through the hole where the living room had been, the entire structure sagging, as the basement fire, hidden, aggressive, and already eating the joists, claimed the space they had just occupied. 2 more seconds, and the crew would have dropped into it. That lieutenant did not possess supernatural powers. What he carried was something quieter, faster, and far more human. A sophisticated form of pattern recognition, built from thousands of hours inside unpredictable environments. His gut feeling was not magic, nor was it mere emotion or the opposite of reason. It was rapid, unconscious cognition, his brain matching the present moment against a vast internal library of stored experiences, surfaces, sounds, and smells, then flagging a dangerous configuration before his conscious mind could assemble the evidence piece by piece. This is what intuition actually is, experience rendered into instantaneous insight. It is not a mystical whisper or an emotional impulse. It is your mind doing what it evolved to do best, detecting coherence and anomaly at a speed that deliberate analysis cannot match, when time is short and stakes are high. The central claim of this book is that the highest quality thinking does not require you to choose between intuition and logic. It emerges when you deliberately bring the two into conversation, letting well-calibrated gut instinct surface possibilities and warnings, while rational analysis tests, refines, and sometimes overrides them. Each mode compensates for the other's blind spots. Intuition excels at reading context, noticing what doesn't fit, and generating options under pressure. Rational thought excels at questioning assumptions, modeling consequences, and guarding against the very biases that can distort even expert intuition. Together, they create a feedback loop more powerful than either alone. This integration has never been more urgent than it is right now. You live inside an environment of constant information overload, dashboards, alerts, endless feeds, and algorithmic recommendations that promise clarity but often deliver noise or hidden bias. Change arrives faster than your procedures can update. The decisions that matter most, career moves, health choices, relationships, investments, leadership calls, rarely arrive with complete or unambiguous data. Pure analysis can leave you paralyzed by options or seduced by metrics that miss the human texture of the situation. Pure intuition, unexamined, can steer you toward familiar patterns that no longer apply in novel conditions. Algorithms and AI systems, for all their speed, still struggle with the messy, value-laden, context-rich problems that define real life. You need a way of thinking that honors both the speed of recognition and the discipline of scrutiny. Over the chapters ahead, we will travel together through the actual mechanics of how intuition forms and functions, separating the reliable patterns experts develop from the seductive illusions that can mislead anyone. We will see how experience can be deliberately accelerated and refined, so your intuitive system becomes better calibrated rather than simply louder. We will examine the predictable ways even strong intuition can go astray, and how clear analysis acts as both safeguard and amplifier. We will watch this integration at work in high-stakes arenas, such as medicine, command, business, and the quieter, but equally consequential decisions of ordinary life, learning what it looks and feels like when the two modes reinforce each other instead of competing. Finally, we will explore how cultivating this merged approach reshapes not only the quality of your choices, but the texture of your attention, your confidence under uncertainty, and your sense of inner alignment. You have likely felt moments like the lieutenants in your own life, sudden certainties or quiet alarms you could not fully explain, yet could not ignore. The question is no longer whether to trust intuition or demand more data. The real question is how to develop both capacities so they serve each other. That is the journey we begin now. Chapter 1: The Science of Knowing Before You Know. You walk into a room full of people you've never met, and within moments, something in you has already formed an impression. Maybe it's the way one person's laugh lands a little too loudly, or the subtle shift in posture of the person standing near the window. You can't yet say why, but a quiet sense of ease or caution has already arrived. Or consider what happens when you drive a familiar stretch of road at the end of a long day. Your thoughts drift to the conversation you had earlier or the meal waiting at home. Yet, your foot finds the brake at the right moment, your hands guide the wheel through the curve, and you arrive safely, without ever consciously directing each movement. These experiences feel so ordinary that you rarely pause to ask what made them possible. Yet, they point to a remarkable capacity your mind possesses: the ability to know something before you can explain how you know it. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent years studying exactly this kind of knowing. He described two broad modes of thought that operate in every human mind. System 2 is the one most of us recognize when we think about thinking. It is slow, deliberate, and effortful. It steps in when you balance your checkbook, weigh the pros and cons of a major purchase, or try to follow a complicated argument. It demands attention and tires quickly, but most of your waking life is not run by System 2. That work falls to System 1, fast, automatic, associative, and almost effortless. System 1 constantly scans your environment, draws connections between present cues and past experiences, and generates impressions, feelings, and impulses before you ever ask for them. Many of the gut feelings you experience are simply System 1 outputs that have risen into awareness. They arrive already formed because the underlying work happened outside your conscious spotlight. You might wonder, though, where these rapid impressions get their information. The answer lies not only in the brain, but in the conversation between brain and body. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients who had suffered damage to areas involved in emotional processing. On paper, these individuals could reason as clearly as anyone. They understood probabilities, remembered facts, and could lay out logical arguments for every option. Yet, when faced with ordinary decisions, like which restaurant to choose or when to schedule a follow-up appointment, they often became paralyzed. Without the ability to generate emotional and bodily signals that tagged one option as preferable to another, pure logic left them adrift among too many equally reasonable possibilities. Damasio proposed that the body itself supplies a kind of rapid summary. Past experiences leave behind subtle emotional and physical traces, changes in heart rate, muscle tension, gut sensation, or a fleeting feeling of warmth or unease. He called these somatic markers. When you face a new situation that resembles something you've encountered before, these markers surface quickly, narrowing the field of options long before your slower, analytical mind can finish listing every variable. Your gut feeling, in this view, is not a mysterious sixth sense. It is your body delivering a compressed report on what similar situations have taught you. This bodily knowing arises from a quiet collaboration among several regions of the brain. The amygdala acts as an early warning system, tagging incoming information with emotional significance almost instantly. This feels threatening. That feels rewarding. This matches something familiar. At the same time, the basal ganglia draw on vast stores of learned patterns and procedures, generating an automatic tendency to approach, avoid, or continue, without needing step-by-step instructions. These signals travel through the body, creating the very sensations you later notice as intuition. Only afterward does the prefrontal cortex, the more recently evolved area responsible for planning and reflection, come fully into play. It can examine the feeling that has already arrived, gather additional evidence, or decide whether the initial signal deserves to guide action. The experience of just knowing is this rapid loop, completing most of its work before your conscious awareness catches up. You have felt this loop in action countless times. You meet someone new, and within seconds, you sense whether conversation will flow easily or require extra care. The impression forms from micro-expressions, tone of voice, posture, and a dozen other cues your system one has learned to read across a lifetime of social encounters. You do not consciously tally these signals. You simply receive the resulting sense of trust or wariness. Or you walk into a situation at work and feel a slight tightening in your chest before you can name what seems wrong. Later, you may discover that a deadline was unrealistic or a colleague was withholding information. The feeling arrived first because your pattern detection machinery noticed a mismatch with how things usually go. These moments are not rare exceptions. They are the normal operation of a brain, built to make sense of incomplete information at high speed. That speed matters most precisely when conditions are least ideal for pure analysis. When information is fragmentary, when time is short, or when the number of variables exceeds what conscious attention can comfortably track, System 2 tends to stall or simplify too aggressively. Intuition, by contrast, offers a starting hypothesis or a warning signal that keeps you moving. It does not have to be perfect to be useful. It simply has to be good enough to orient you toward the next useful action or the next piece of information worth gathering. The fire lieutenant you met in the introduction did not wait for a complete structural analysis before ordering his crew out of the building. His System 1, shaped by years of entering unpredictable spaces, registered a configuration that had preceded trouble in the past. That rapid signal bought the seconds that mattered. None of this requires believing in anything mystical. Your brain is an extraordinary pattern detection machine that never stops working. It associates the present moment with thousands of previous moments, compresses what it has learned into bodily sensations and emotional tones, and surfaces the result as a feeling you experience as intuition. The process happens below awareness because that is where it can operate fastest and with the least demand on your limited attention. What arrives in consciousness is already a conclusion, not the raw data that produced it. Yet, the quality of those conclusions depends on something we have not yet examined. The patterns your System 1 has stored are only as reliable as the experiences that shaped them. Some people's intuitions grow steadily wiser over time. Others remain prone to the same misreads year after year. What makes the difference is not simply the passage of time, but the nature of the experience itself, how varied it is, how honestly feedback is received, and whether the person has learned to notice when the feeling deserves closer scrutiny. That is the territory we enter next. Chapter 2: Building Trustworthy Gut Instincts. You have probably watched someone who is truly skilled at their craft and felt a quiet awe at how little they seem to struggle. The fireground commander, who senses structural trouble before any instrument confirms it. The chess grandmaster, who glances at the board and moves almost without hesitation. The emergency room nurse, who pauses at a patient's bedside and says, "Something's not right here," long before the vital signs turn alarming. These moments look like magic from the outside. From the inside, they feel like simple recognition. Gary Klein spent years sitting with firefighters, military commanders, and other professionals who routinely make life and death decisions under time pressure. What he discovered was that their most reliable choices rarely came from weighing several alternatives against one another. Instead, they recognized the situation as similar to ones they had faced before. Once that recognition clicked, they would mentally simulate the first action that seemed workable. If the simulation felt coherent, if the imagined sequence fit the way the world was behaving in that moment, they acted. If something fell off during the mental rehearsal, they quickly adjusted or tried the next plausible move. Klein called this recognition prime decision making. It is not guessing. It is pattern matching, followed by rapid mental testing, all happening faster than most people can describe afterward. Consider again the lieutenant who ordered his crew out of the burning house. He did not pause to list every possible reason the floor might fail. He had walked through enough compromised structures over the years that the subtle extra give under his boots, the way the smoke moved, and the absence of expected resistance registered as a familiar, dangerous configuration. His mind supplied a single, urgent action: get everyone out, and the mental simulation of staying any longer felt immediately wrong. He did not need to compare that action against 3 other options. The recognition itself carried the decision. The same process appears in other domains, where time and stakes are high. A chess grandmaster does not calculate every legal move on the board. After tens of thousands of hours studying positions, certain configurations have become deeply familiar. When one appears, strong candidate moves rise into awareness almost instantly. The Grandmaster then mentally plays out the most promising line, sensing whether the position improves or collapses. Only if the simulation reveals a flaw does the search for another move begin. An experienced emergency physician or nurse learns to read the early, subtle signatures of deterioration: a slight change in skin perfusion, a shift in respiratory rhythm, a patient's uncharacteristic quietness, because those signatures have appeared in previous cases that later turned critical. The recognition triggers a hypothesis and a first action: order this test, start this intervention, call for help. Athletes at the highest levels do something similar. A point guard sees the defense rotate a certain way and already knows where the open shooter will be before the play fully develops. The body begins moving toward the pass, while the conscious mind is still registering the initial cue. What separates these experts from novices is not some special talent for trusting their gut. It is the sheer number and quality of mental patterns they have accumulated. Novices possess far fewer well-indexed experiences. Their hunches are often based on surface similarities or wishful thinking, and they lack the rich library needed to simulate outcomes accurately. Experts, by contrast, carry thousands of patterns, each linked to what worked, what failed, and why. The patterns are indexed not just by obvious features, but by deeper structural similarities. The way a fire behaves in an old building versus a new one. The way a patient's body signals compensation before decompensation. The way a chest position's tension resolves in one direction rather than another. When a new situation arrives, the expert's mind finds the closest matches with remarkable speed and proposes actions that have succeeded in those matches before. This library does not build itself through ordinary time on the job. The research of Anders Ericsson and his colleagues on expert performance shows that what matters most is deliberate practice, focused, goal-directed effort, designed to improve specific aspects of performance, accompanied by immediate and accurate feedback. The practice pushes the person just beyond their current comfort zone, forces refinement of mental models, and reveals where the patterns are still fuzzy or incomplete. Mere repetition without attention to feedback tends to reinforce existing habits rather than sharpen them. London taxi drivers who undertake the knowledge, that is, years of intensive study to master every street, alley, and landmark in the city, develop measurably larger hippocampi, the brain structure heavily involved in spatial memory and navigation. Their ability to choose the fastest route under changing traffic conditions becomes extraordinarily reliable because the feedback is immediate and unambiguous. They either reach the destination efficiently or they do not, and the discrepancy updates their internal map. Domains that supply rapid, clear feedback tend to produce well-calibrated intuition. Weather forecasters receive daily verification of their predictions. Certain areas of medicine allow practitioners to see within hours or days whether an early judgment was sound. In fields where feedback is delayed, ambiguous, or filtered through politics and ego, such as long-term strategic planning, complex financial forecasting, or many management decisions, even experienced people can develop overconfident, but poorly calibrated intuitions. The patterns they have stored may be based on incomplete or misleading outcomes, and they have little opportunity to correct them. One reason expert intuition can feel mysterious, even to the person experiencing it, is that the recognition and simulation happen too quickly and too far below conscious awareness for us to observe the steps. By the time you notice the feeling of certainty or the quiet alarm, the matching process has already finished. You cannot list the thousands of prior cases that contributed to the match, any more than you can list every word you know when you understand a sentence. The feeling simply arrives as a finished product. This speed is precisely what makes the capacity valuable in time-pressured situations. Yet, it also explains why the process can seem opaque or even magical from the inside. The encouraging truth is that reliable gut instincts are not a mysterious gift granted to a fortunate few. They are the result of particular kinds of experience, organized through deliberate practice and honest feedback. The patterns can be strengthened, the mental simulations made more accurate, and the recognition made more discerning. In the next chapter, we will look first at where even experienced intuition can fail, because understanding its characteristic blind spots is essential preparation for the practical work of making it more trustworthy. Chapter 3: The Hidden Traps in Our Intuitive Judgments. You have seen how an experienced fire commander or emergency nurse can sense danger or deterioration long before the data becomes obvious. Those moments feel clean and reliable. Yet, the same mental machinery that produces such valuable recognition can also generate confident errors when the underlying patterns no longer match the situation at hand. Intuition is never stronger than the quality of the experience that trained it and the predictability of the environment in which it operates. When either of those foundations weakens, what feels like a clear gut signal can quietly steer you toward costly mistakes. Consider a physician who examines a patient complaining of chest pain and fatigue. The symptoms remind her of a recent case that turned out to be a straightforward heart attack, so she orders the usual cardiac workup and begins treatment along those lines. Hours later, the patient worsens. Further tests reveal a pulmonary embolism that was masked by the initial similarity. The doctor did not ignore evidence out of carelessness. She anchored on the first plausible pattern her intuition supplied, and then interpreted subsequent information in light of that early impression. Anchoring is one of the ways System 1 can lock onto a starting point and make it difficult for slower, analytical thinking to pull free. Other biases operate in similar fashion, presenting themselves as intuitive certainty. The availability heuristic leads you to judge how likely something is by how easily examples come to mind. After weeks of news coverage about a particular kind of accident or crime, you may feel a heightened sense of risk, even when the statistical probability has not changed. The effect heuristic works through immediate emotional coloring. If you feel good about a person, investment, or plan, you tend to judge the risks as lower and the benefits as higher than a cooler analysis would suggest. The representativeness heuristic pushes you to judge probability by how closely something matches a prototype. The famous Linda problem illustrates this vividly. People are told about Linda, a bright, outspoken woman who was a philosophy major and active in social justice causes. When asked whether it is more probable that Linda is a bank teller or that she is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement, many choose the second option. It feels more representative of the description they just heard, even though adding any extra detail to a category can only make it less probable, never more. These shortcuts feel like intuition because they arrive quickly and with a sense of rightness. They are not random mistakes. They are the predictable output of a pattern-seeking system, operating under conditions it was not designed to handle perfectly. Emotional states make the problem worse. When you are stressed, angry, fatigued, or highly excited, your thinking narrows. The range of patterns your mind considers shrinks, and the emotional signals that usually serve as useful somatic markers become louder and less discriminating. A hiring manager under deadline pressure may feel an immediate positive vibe from a candidate who reminds him of a past star performer, and then downplay or overlook red flags that would have been obvious in a calmer state. An investor riding a wave of market optimism may sense that a particular stock feels right because recent gains have created an effective glow, only to discover later that the underlying fundamentals never supported the price. The same narrowing happens in personal life. You meet someone who triggers a strong initial attraction or sense of familiarity. The feeling is vivid and convincing. Over weeks or months, small inconsistencies appear, promises not kept, values that clash, moments of disregard. Yet, the original intuitive certainty continues to color how you interpret new information. You find yourself explaining away evidence that contradicts the early feeling, rather than updating the feeling in light of the evidence. The intuition has not been updated because the emotional commitment to the first impression remains strong. These errors become especially likely in environments that differ from the ones in which your patterns were formed. High-validity environments reward accurate intuition because they offer clear, rapid feedback and relatively stable underlying rules. Firefighting, chess, and certain kinds of medical diagnosis often fit this description. You receive fairly quick information about whether your recognition was correct, and the structure of the situation does not change dramatically from one encounter to the next. Low validity or rapidly changing environments offer the opposite. The cues that once predicted success may no longer do so. A sales approach that worked brilliantly 10 years ago can fall flat with today's buyers. An investment thesis built on patterns from a low interest rate era can produce painful losses when conditions shift. Novel situations, a new technology, a cultural change, a role you have never held, leave your existing patterns without reliable matches. In those moments, the feeling of intuitive certainty can be especially misleading because your mind still supplies a confident answer, even when the underlying patterns are outdated or irrelevant. One of the most subtle traps is what happens after the intuitive reaction arrives. You often form an immediate impression or preference, and then search for reasons that justify it. The post hoc rationalization feels like careful thinking, yet the conclusion was already reached before the reasoning began. A manager who has taken an instinctive dislike to a team member may later cite performance metrics or attitude problems that were never mentioned before the dislike formed. An individual who has decided against a particular opportunity may generate an impressive list of practical objections, unaware that the decision was driven by an earlier, unexamined feeling of unease. The logical sounding explanation arrives after the fact and can make the original intuitive judgment feel more solid than it actually is. You can learn to notice early signals that your intuition is operating in conditions where it is likely to mislead. High emotional arousal is one such signal. When your body is flooded with stress hormones or intense excitement, the patterns that surface tend to be simpler and more extreme. Lack of relevant expertise is another. A strong feeling in a domain where you have little accumulated experience is more likely to reflect surface similarity or wishful thinking than deep pattern recognition. Absence of rapid, unambiguous feedback makes calibration difficult. You may continue to trust patterns that have never been properly tested. Finally, any situation that has changed significantly since your experience was formed should prompt extra scrutiny. The world your intuition was trained in may no longer exist in important ways. Recognizing these traps does not require you to distrust every gut feeling. It requires you to notice when the conditions that make intuition trustworthy are missing or degraded. That awareness itself becomes a kind of higher-order intuition, a feeling that this particular hunch deserves closer examination rather than immediate trust. With that recognition in place, we can turn to the practical work of strengthening the patterns themselves and learning when to let analysis step in and refine what intuition has offered. Chapter 4: How to Strengthen and Calibrate Your Intuition. You have seen how even experienced intuition can be led astray when the patterns are outdated, the environment has changed, or emotional noise drowns out subtler signals. The encouraging truth is that you do not have to wait for better gut feelings to arrive on their own. You can treat intuition as a skill that improves with deliberate practice, much as a musician refines tone or a surgeon sharpens diagnostic perception. The goal is not sudden perfection, but steady calibration, learning when your internal signals are trustworthy and when they need closer examination or additional information. One of the most direct ways to build this calibration is to keep a simple intuition journal. When a strong hunch arises, whether about a person you have just met, a project timeline that feels too optimistic, or a choice between two paths, you record it briefly. You note the feeling itself, the confidence level you attach to it in that moment, and the key cues that seem to trigger it. Days or weeks later, when the outcome is known, you return to the entry and note what actually happened. Over time, the pattern becomes visible. You discover that your high-confidence hunches in certain domains are surprisingly accurate, while in other areas, your certainty regularly outruns reality. The act of recording forces a feedback loop that many environments fail to provide naturally. Without it, you tend to remember only the times your intuition felt right and quietly forget the misses. The journal makes both visible and gradually teaches you where your pattern recognition is already strong and where it still needs work. Another powerful practice is the premortem. Before you commit to an important decision or plan, you pause and imagine that it has already failed. Then you work backward, asking what could have gone wrong. The exercise feels slightly uncomfortable at first, because it runs counter to the natural optimism that often accompanies a new commitment. Yet, that discomfort is precisely what makes it valuable. When you assume failure has already occurred, your mind becomes more willing to surface risks that pure forward reasoning or unchecked enthusiasm tends to overlook. A team preparing to launch a new product might discover, through a premortem, that the early customer feedback they dismissed as minor actually pointed to a fundamental misunderstanding of the market. A person considering a major career move might realize that the excitement about the new role has caused them to minimize the loss of certain relationships or support structures that matter more than they had admitted. The premortem does not paralyze action. It simply widens the range of patterns your intuition and analysis can consider before you move forward. You can also strengthen intuition by deliberately expanding the library of patterns your mind has available to draw upon. This happens most effectively when you seek experiences outside your usual routines and actively look for perspectives that challenge your existing assumptions. Cross-domain learning is especially useful. A leader who studies how ecologists think about complex systems or how designers approach ambiguous problems often returns to their own field with fresh pattern recognition tools. Seeking disconfirming perspectives, like asking people who see the situation differently to explain their view, helps counteract the tendency to notice only what confirms an early impression. Even simple practices, such as traveling to unfamiliar places, learning a new skill that requires close observation, or regularly exposing yourself to viewpoints you would normally avoid, can enrich the mental models that feed your intuitive system. The broader and more varied the library, the more accurate the recognition becomes when a new situation arrives. Internal conditions matter as much as external experience. Your capacity to notice and interpret subtle signals depends heavily on how rested, regulated, and attentive your nervous system is. Chronic sleep deprivation dulls the very brain regions involved in pattern recognition and emotional tagging. Persistent stress or constant digital distraction narrows attention and amplifies the loudest emotional signals, while quieting the quieter, often more accurate ones. Developing greater body awareness, sometimes called interoception, helps you register those quieter signals earlier. You might notice a slight tightening in your chest or a shift in breathing when a conversation takes a certain turn, or a subtle sense of ease when a plan aligns with deeper priorities. These bodily cues are the somatic markers we explored earlier. They become more useful when you create the internal conditions that allow them to be heard. Simple practices, such as brief pauses during the day to check in with your physical state, reducing the constant switching between tasks, and protecting consistent sleep, all make the intuitive system more reliable rather than more reactive. You can also practice calibration in low-stakes settings, where the cost of being wrong is small. Each morning, you might predict how long a familiar task will actually take, and then record the actual time. Or you might forecast the likelihood of rain on a given afternoon, and later check the outcome. These micro-predictions train your sense of your own accuracy. Over weeks and months, you develop a more realistic feel for when your confidence is warranted and when it is inflated. The habit transfers to higher stakes decisions because you have already practiced noticing the difference between a well-calibrated hunch and one that merely feels convincing. None of these practices promises perfect intuition. Human judgment will always contain uncertainty, and some environments will remain inherently difficult to read. What these methods do offer is progressively better calibration, a growing ability to know which of your internal signals deserve trust, which deserve a second look, and which should be set aside in favor of more deliberate analysis. The improvements compound quietly. A journal entry from 6 months ago that once felt inconsequential now reveals a pattern you can apply to a current choice. A premortem that once felt awkward becomes a natural part of how you approach any significant commitment. The body awareness that once required deliberate checking begins to operate more automatically. These foundations prepare you for the most important work still ahead, learning how to bring intuition and rational analysis into productive partnership in the moment of decision. That integration is where the real power of this approach reveals itself. Chapter 5: Decision Frameworks that Use Both Head and Gut. You have probably felt the tension between two competing voices. One says to gather more data, run the numbers, and think through every angle before deciding. The other says the answer is already clear if you would only listen to what your body and experience are telling you. For too long, we have treated these as rival approaches, as if you must choose to be either rational or intuitive. However, the truth is more practical and more hopeful. The highest quality decisions emerge when you deliberately create structures that let calibrated intuition and clear analysis inform each other. These structures are learnable. They turn the integration of head and gut from a vague aspiration into a repeatable skill. One effective sequence begins with analysis and then consults intuition. You lay out the options as clearly as possible, gather relevant data, and examine the logical consequences of each path. Only after that disciplined work do you pause and ask which option feels most alive, coherent, or aligned with what you know from experience. The analysis narrows the field and surfaces considerations you might otherwise miss. The intuition then acts as a final filter, revealing whether a particular choice resonates with deeper patterns your conscious mind has not fully articulated. The reverse sequence is equally powerful. You begin with intuition, allowing a direction or hypothesis to surface from recognition and somatic signals. You then subject that hypothesis to rigorous testing. You ask what evidence would support or undermine it, what assumptions it rests upon, and what would have to be true for it to succeed. In this order, intuition supplies the candidate worth examining, while analysis prevents you from accepting the first plausible feeling that arrives. Several practical frameworks make this integration concrete. The pre-mortem, which you encountered earlier as an individual practice, becomes even more powerful when used with others. Before finalizing a plan, everyone assumes the decision has already failed and works backward to identify the reasons. The exercise surfaces risks that pure optimism or narrow analysis tends to overlook, while also giving quieter intuitive concerns a legitimate voice in the room. Structured devil's advocate or red teaming serves a similar purpose from the opposite direction. You assign someone, or play the role yourself, to argue forcefully against the option that currently feels strongest. The goal is not to win the argument, but to stress test the favored path until its weaknesses become visible. When the intuitive signal is strong, this process either reveals that the feeling was well-founded or uncovers flaws that need addressing before you proceed. Another useful approach borrows from probabilistic thinking. Instead of declaring that a choice feels right or must be done, you practice stating your level of confidence in specific terms. You might say, "I'm about 70% confident this approach will succeed, and the main uncertainty is how the market will respond to the timing." The probabilistic language keeps analysis honest by acknowledging what remains unknown. At the same time, you check whether that stated confidence resonates with your deeper sense of the situation. If your words claim high confidence, but your body registers unease, the mismatch becomes useful information rather than something to ignore. For complex or emotionally charged decisions, deliberate incubation often proves valuable. You do the initial analysis and listen to your initial intuitive response, then you step away. You sleep on it, take a walk, or focus on unrelated work. During that pause, Your unconscious pattern recognition system continues to work in the background, sometimes surfacing new connections or clarifying why a particular option feels off. When you return, both the analytical picture and the intuitive signal are often sharper. These frameworks show their value across many domains. In medicine, a team reviewing a difficult case will have lab results, imaging, and published guidelines in front of them. Yet, an experienced clinician may still feel that something does not fit the expected picture. When the team creates space for that clinical intuition to be voiced and examined, rather than dismissed, the diagnosis sometimes shifts in time to matter. In product and design work, quantitative data may show that users engage more with one interface than another. At the same time, a designer may sense that a different direction better serves the long-term identity and emotional experience of the product. When both signals are brought into the conversation and tested against each other, the resulting decision tends to be more robust than either data or feel alone would have produced. Entrepreneurs and organizational leaders regularly face moments when the financial projections look sound, but their internal sense of timing, cultural fit, or personal energy says otherwise. The leaders who have developed ways to honor both the spreadsheet and the deeper resonance tend to avoid both reckless leaps and endless analysis paralysis. In personal life, the same pattern appears. You may create a careful list of pros and cons for a career move or a significant relationship decision. Yet, the list rarely captures the full weight of how each path feels when you imagine living it over months and years. Frameworks that let you test the logical case against the felt sense help you avoid both impulsive choices and decisions that look perfect on paper, but leave you quietly misaligned. None of this works if people fear that expressing an intuitive concern will be treated as irrational or weak. Psychological safety matters enormously. In teams, and even in families, it helps to establish an explicit norm that a statement such as, "I have a bad feeling about this, though I can't yet say exactly why," is treated as valuable data, rather than something that must be immediately justified with bullet points. When that norm exists, the person carrying the intuitive signal can offer it early enough to matter, and others can respond with curiosity rather than defense. The group then has the opportunity to explore what the feeling might be tracking before momentum carries everyone forward. These integrated approaches reduce two common failure modes at once. They prevent analysis paralysis by giving intuition a structured role, rather than requiring endless additional data before any action feels safe. They also prevent reckless gut-driven action by ensuring that intuitive signals are examined, rather than followed blindly. The result is decisions that move forward with appropriate speed, while carrying fewer hidden risks. As you practice these frameworks, they gradually become less like external tools and more like a natural way of thinking. The pre-mortem, the red team question, the probabilistic check, and the pause for incubation start to arise almost automatically when stakes are high. That fluency prepares you for the distinctive pressures of the world we now inhabit, a world of constant information, algorithmic influence, and accelerating change. It is to those challenges that we turn next. Chapter 6: Using Integrated Thinking in a Complex Digital World. You live inside an environment that would have been unimaginable even a generation ago. Endless streams of information arrive from every direction. Algorithms anticipate what you might want to see next, and serve it before you ask. Notifications pull your attention in competing directions throughout the day. Major decisions about work, health, relationships, and how to spend your limited time must be made against a backdrop of constant stimulation and accelerating change. In this setting, the old tension between intuition and analysis does not disappear. It intensifies. The question is no longer whether you can afford to integrate the two. It is whether you can develop the capacity to do so before the noise overwhelms both. Artificial intelligence and sophisticated data systems now excel at forms of pattern detection and logical processing that once required human effort. They can scan vast data sets, identify statistical regularities, and generate recommendations at speeds no person could match. Yet, these systems still depend on human judgment for everything that matters most when stakes are high or situations are novel. They lack lived context for what a particular pattern actually means in a specific life. They cannot reliably weigh ethical trade-offs that involve values rather than metrics. They struggle with true edge cases, the rare presentation, the unprecedented combination of factors, because those cases fall outside the training data, and they cannot decide which questions are worth asking in the first place. That act of framing remains a distinctively human contribution, one that draws on both the rapid recognition of intuition and the reflective scrutiny of analysis. The digital environment does more than offer powerful tools. It also reshapes the conditions under which your own intuition develops and operates. Social platforms train pattern recognition toward immediate emotional reactions, like outrage, envy, tribal belonging, because those reactions drive engagement. Over time, the cues your system learns to notice can become skewed toward what produces quick emotional charge, rather than what predicts long-term outcomes. Constant notifications and rapid context-switching fragment attention, making it harder to sustain the deeper processing required for accurate calibration. When you rarely experience uninterrupted time, opportunities for incubation shrink. The quiet background work that allows patterns to consolidate and new connections to form has fewer chances to occur. Speed itself becomes a cultural default. Many environments now reward quick responses and visible activity over the slower work of reflection and integration. Under these conditions, even well-intentioned people can find their intuitive signals growing noisier and less reliable, precisely when the decisions in front of them are growing more consequential. You can push back against these pressures with deliberate practices that protect and strengthen integrated thinking. Curating your information inputs matters more than ever. You can choose sources that reward depth over reactivity, that present competing perspectives rather than reinforcing existing ones, and that operate on longer time horizons than the current news cycle. Creating rituals for slow thinking, a morning walk without devices, a weekly review that begins with open-ended questions rather than immediate tasks, or dedicated time to sit with a complex decision before discussing it, gives both analysis and intuition room to operate. These are not luxuries. They are the modern equivalent of the conditions that once allowed experts in high-validity environments to calibrate their judgment through repeated, clear feedback. You can also treat AI and algorithmic tools as powerful assistants, rather than replacements for judgment. Use them to surface options, summarize data, or simulate scenarios quickly. Then bring the frameworks you have practiced, pre-mortems, probabilistic language, red teaming, and deliberate incubation, to the results they produce. Ask what the system might be missing because it lacks your particular context or values. Notice when a recommendation feels slightly off, even though it appears optimal on the metrics provided. That slight dissonance is often your integrated intelligence registering information the model was never trained to see. At an organizational level, you can design systems that reduce noise around intuitive signals. This might mean creating meeting structures that explicitly invite early concerns, rather than requiring fully formed arguments. It might mean protecting blocks of focused time so that people can do the deep work that generates better pattern recognition in the first place. It might mean establishing norms that treat a well-calibrated "something feels wrong here" as data worth exploring rather than an obstacle to speed. There remain important domains where human integrated thinking is not merely helpful, but irreplaceable. Creative breakthroughs often depend on the ability to sense when a new combination of elements carries unexpected resonance or meaning, a judgment that current systems can support, but not originate. Ethical leadership requires weighing competing values in situations where no algorithm can define what good ultimately means for the people involved. Complex relationships, whether personal or professional, unfold through subtle cues and long-term patterns that reward the kind of attention only a human nervous system, shaped by its own history of connection, can sustain. Parenting and caregiving decisions frequently involve trade-offs between measurable outcomes and intangible qualities of presence, security, and love that data alone cannot capture. Health choices that touch on identity, fear, hope, and what kind of life feels worth living similarly exceed what even the most sophisticated models can resolve, without human wisdom at the center. In an age when machines can handle more and more of the fast, scalable pattern matching that once demanded human effort, the capacity to think with both head and gut becomes more distinctive rather than less. It is the ability to notice what the data misses, to ask better questions, to sense alignment or misalignment with deeper values, and to move forward with appropriate confidence, even when certainty remains impossible. This integrated capability does not make you slower in every case. It often allows you to move more wisely, and sometimes more quickly, because you waste less time on options that look good on paper, but feel wrong in ways you have learned to respect. It equips you to use the remarkable tools now available, without becoming dependent on them for the judgments only you can make. And it offers a way of moving through uncertainty that feels less like a battle between opposing forces and more like the natural expression of a mind that has learned to use all of its intelligence. That kind of capability is not becoming obsolete. It is becoming the quiet advantage that matters most. Conclusion. You began with a moment in which a single, unexplained feeling saved lives, because it drew on patterns an experienced mind had stored, long before the conscious mind could name them. From there, we traced how such feelings arise from the brain's remarkable capacity for rapid pattern recognition, how that capacity grows more trustworthy when fed by deliberate practice and honest feedback, and how even strong intuition can still be led astray by bias, emotional noise, or environments that have changed since the patterns were formed. We explored the simple disciplines that sharpen both the signals themselves and your ability to know and to trust them. And we examined the repeatable structures that let calibrated intuition and clear analysis work together rather than compete. What emerged is not a complicated theory, but a handful of guiding truths. Intuition is cultivated expertise rather than a fixed trait. It deepens or dulls according to the quality of attention and feedback you give it. It remains reliable only when it operates in conditions that allow clear perception and when you have built ways to test its accuracy over time. Neither pure analysis nor raw feeling serves most real decisions well on its own. The integration of the two, supported by light structures, consistently produces choices that are both quicker and sounder than either extreme. And the practices that make this integration possible are simple enough to begin immediately, yet powerful enough that their benefits accumulate quietly across months and years. You can start this week with 3 modest experiments. Choose one recurring domain in your life where decisions carry real weight: how you spend your time, which opportunities you pursue, or how you respond to tension in an important relationship. Keep a lightweight record for the next 7 days. When a clear hunch appears, note it briefly, along with how confident you feel and what cues seem to be driving it. When the outcome becomes known, add what actually happened. The act of recording itself begins to reveal where your pattern recognition is already strong and where it still needs refinement. Second, take one upcoming decision of moderate importance and run a short premortem. Assume the choice has already turned out poorly, then spend 10 minutes tracing backward what might have caused that result. The exercise often surfaces risks or misalignments that neither data nor initial enthusiasm would have revealed. Third, protect 10 quiet minutes each day, first thing in the morning or just before sleep, simply to notice what your body is signaling about the day's events or the choices ahead. You are not solving problems in those minutes. You are giving your slower, integrative processes space to operate. When these ways of working become habitual, something shifts in how you move through uncertainty. You gather information without sliding into paralysis, because you have learned when additional analysis is genuinely useful, and when it has become a way of avoiding the feeling that already knows the answer. You honor intuitive signals without following them blindly, because you have practiced noticing when those signals are well calibrated and when they are distorted by fatigue, emotion, or outdated patterns. Regret tends to decrease, not because every decision turns out perfectly, but because fewer choices are made against your own deeper knowing. Creative work gains range, because you can entertain possibilities that feel alive while still stress testing them against evidence. And a quiet alignment grows between the life you are rationally constructing and the life that feels coherent when you imagine living it over time. This capacity is not something you master once and then possess. It is a way of relating to your own mind that continues to mature for as long as you keep paying attention to how your thinking actually works in the situations that matter to you. The structures and disciplines we have explored are simply tools for that attention. What you do with them now belongs entirely to you. Thank you for spending this time with these ideas.